So that's so we are in our 19th month, and we are fully aware that there's so many papers about COVID. So I also took the plunge to write a paper about COVID, joined with Teng Fei and others. So Teng Fei is a postdoc right now at Cambridge. So what we do here, so again, for this paper, we also have some measures of innovation, which is firm level measure of exposure and responses to COVID-19. So the research question is, given that culture is intangible, so we want to look at whether culture really helps firms in hard times. So this is a little bit echo prior work by Carl Lins and others, a JF paper, look at firms' social capital during financial crisis. So intangible seems to be really, really important in hard times. So this is kind of in a similar thinking. So what we do is we're going to use textual analysis. So Shan, do you have another question?
No. Oh, sorry, I should lower my hand. Sorry.
Your hand, okay. Yeah, so what we do is we have so much time during the past 19 months thinking about COVID. So from corporate perspective is to look at industries and firms, their exposure to COVID and how do they respond. And also the very broad question, which is really also important, is what makes firms resilient. That is, make firms outperform during COVID-19. So not surprisingly, firms do a lot of CSR, ESG will do better. So let's think, we are thinking about culture. So what we do, as I said, that this data is also available upon request. So we are among the first to measure firm level exposure and response related to COVID using earnings call as our textual data, and also using combination of two machine learning techniques. So word embedding and also topic modeling, just a little bit more sophisticated than the plain vanilla topic modeling. We allow the topics to be correlated, which turned out to be quite helpful for us to delineate exposure, firm level exposure, and the response to COVID. So this paper also contributed to a general understanding of the importance of intangibles. We know human capital, we know innovation important. So here we're highlighting the role of corporate culture is also important in enhancing firm value. So lastly, we know that just like my response to Michelle and others earlier, in corporate finance, it's very difficult to establish causality unless you have natural experiment. So in this particular case, the only natural shock, unfortunately, exogenous shock is COVID pandemic. So what we could do is not like the causal effect of culture and firm value, but an interaction effect. That is a causal effect of bad time on the positive link between culture and value. So that's another contribution. So for this paper, we also have some conceptual framework that is exactly how culture works in hard times for firms. So this is go back to the definition about culture, which is a set of values and norms that dictate the employees' behavior without employees being told what to do or without employees being rewarded to what they do. So it's really like culture is almost like an invisible but a disciplinary hands that employees just automated know what they should do even in hard times if a firm has strong culture. So that's exactly what we have in here is that during COVID-19, when changes are much faster than responses and the policies, firms with a strong culture and employees, rank and file employees will be so incentivized because of strong culture, a sense of belonging. They're just going to work hard and do more without even being asked for. Like even from working at home, they're still going to be very productive. So that's exactly our conceptual framework that culture matters in general, but culture will really make firm that with a strong culture stand out during bad times. Because of this intangible, this invisible disciplinary hand, many employees just know what they should do even in hard time without asking guidance, without asking for higher pay. We're also going to delineate two channels. So remember, so in the previous presentation, we talked about kind of 5 values. So we're going to have innovation and the quality as the technology channel, and all the 3 other, which are like people-centric channel, so like the teamwork, integrity, respect. So we expect that because of a strong culture will really create the sense of belonging to employees that will lead to, without asking for higher pay, but going to result in higher productivity. So that's the human capital channel. Then the technological channel is my response to Wenting, that innovation and quality, especially innovation, before our work, when people talk about innovation, they just use measurable metrics like patents and R&D expenditure. But during COVID, that the technology channel actually could show up firm with a strong culture in technology, in innovation, and also in quality, will actually show up. Those firms will actually respond to COVID-19 in a variety of creative ways. What we're highlighting would be like pivoting to digital technology. So immediate pivoting from physical presence, like with brick and mortar floor, like shop space, to online presence. So Nike was one of the success stories, and also introduce new product service. You can think about all of us, most of us are vaccinated. So that just shows how much technology innovation in the healthcare space. And in the end, we show that firmly strong culture, which actually show up also going to have higher operating performance because of reducing cost and also being swift in their delivery method from physical to online. And also because of new product services, they can also charge more. So they get, eventually they end up with a healthy bottom line. So the sample we do, we really, so our goal is to measure firm level response and firm level exposure. So we really don't want those, we also need to be careful that right after March also, there start a lot of government payout and handouts to both corporations and citizens. So we don't want our measure to be contaminated by government rescue efforts. So that's why our sample it's also a US-centric analysis. So we are doing text analysis in English. So we're going to capture US firms that they had earnings calls in that particular period from January to April. So starting from January 22nd, because United was the first one to talk about the COVID. Before January 22nd, when people talk about virus, it's really nothing to do with COVID. So we do not want any contamination. And after April 30, because of government rescue, it might not necessarily capture firms immediate innate response to the shock, but maybe kind of a factor shaped by government rescue package. So here how we capture measure. So this is subsequent work from the prior paper. So we're just going to use the measure we have, and we're going to instead use a continuous measure. We just use a dummy variable firm with a strong culture if they are in the top quartile. So here show you the data and the challenges we face and the solutions we provide. Same time. Yeah. So here, so remember where we get our data is from earnings calls. So these are showing you the call example during the period from January to April. Different companies who hold the earnings calls, how they talk about they are affected, how they are affected by COVID. The very first example is from Tesla, really talk about their supply chain in Shanghai that totally affected. Now, surprisingly, we know leisure travel industry suffered the most. So the next two is the cruise line and the Marriott. So they talk about, you see, slowdown in their business, in bookings. And also here, Marriott is international, is a conglomerate. So they also talk about different regions start to see decline in booking. So this just give you an idea about in earnings calls, management do talk about how COVID affect them. So the challenge for us is to get a systematic measure across all firms for that period of time. Second, this slide deck just showing you also our objective is not only to look at how firms are suffering from COVID, and also to look at positive, how firms react, gaining strength from the COVID. So here using 3 examples. So Nike, I mentioned before, Nike is one of the success stories, is their embracement of technology, so that they transition smoothly from physical to digital marketing campaign and introducing new products. Similarly, like pharmaceuticals and also McDonald's, then they talk about, so for pharmaceuticals, they really talk about new product service offerings. And for McDonald's, interestingly, is to talk about community engagement. So corporate charity donations, yeah. So this is the data. So the challenge for us is to how to get systematic measures. So as again, in the just like the first part of paper, that the whole purpose of earnings call is definitely not to talk just about COVID. So we really need to single out relevant discussions in the earnings call that is about COVID to have a more focused analysis, because earnings call is really about discussing past and forward performance, not about COVID. So we need to reduce the number of topics in the calls. So we need to limit the textual data before our analysis. So that's the first one. Secondly, now it's like, I keep on saying COVID because I just follow the World Health Organization definition that COVID-19 is like the vocabulary WHO used for COVID, to refer to COVID-19 or the pandemic. But if you think about over time in earnings calls, firm might refer to their exposure to COVID-19 beyond just the word, the virus or pandemic and or shelter in place, etc. They might use a variety of other words. So that requires us in this paper again is to build our own COVID-19 dictionary. That is, we will start with an unambiguous name for the pandemic from WHO, which is COVID-19. Then we're just going to do a word embedding in the entire earnings calls to have an expanded word list to define, to identify firms are really talking about COVID-19 and the pandemic. Then we focus on those paragraphs to do our topic modeling for exposures and the responses. So that's the second challenge. So the third one is one nice thing about topic modeling is that you only need to give a number of topics, but once you have once you see the output from topic modeling, especially related paragraphs where those words show up, and also the word cloud, is kind of relatively easy to interpret what the firms are talking about. So topic modeling allow us to divide like the final 35 topics into 2 brackets, exposure versus response. So that's what we do. So here we are, the flow chart. So what's our goal here? Our ultimate goal is what makes firms resilient. Our specific goal is use textual data to compute firm level measure of their suffering. So we call exposure, and also their response to COVID-19. And we try to relate their suffering, the exposure, response, and culture to the bottom line, their stock return and their operating performance. So that's the corporate finance part. So what we do is earnings call has so many topics. So we do not want to get sidetracked. So what we do first is to use WHO word COVID-19 to do a word embedding. So we come up with 1,000 possible synonym for COVID-19, use word embedding. Then among the authors on the paper conveying in the audience, we keep the 419 words that when we have a consensus among 4 of us that this is about COVID-19, it's not something about Ebola in Africa. So for example, so that's how we do it. So once we have those words, we just do a global search of any sentences any paragraphs contain those words, become the focal paragraph that become the starting point for our topic modeling. So we end up with, so this is the corpus we're going to work, that among these 40,000 paragraphs, they all had some discussion about COVID-19 or its synonym that we develop ourselves. Then among those 40,000 paragraphs, we do a topic modeling, and we end up with 35 topics, and we also use their test statistics to define whether this topic is right. Most importantly for us is interpretability, whether these 35 topics are very well defined. Not surprisingly, there are a lot of the topics are just a boilerplate, like greetings and goodbye, and also disclaimer, etc. But for the remaining topics, we really see that they are very relevant. And among the 15, we consolidate them into 6 types to capture firms' exposure, so the negative part, and 4 captures firms' immediate reaction to COVID-19. And we want to correlate all those to corporate culture. So here is a word for transparency. So this is the word list of the 400 plus. If you stare at them, so there's some, it's like word embedding is really powerful. So we really can have things like government imposed like a lockdown that would be, and also health issue, health risk, etc. Social distancing, now it's called physical distancing. So the vocabulary evolving. So that's our, so this is the dictionary for COVID-19 for us to tag all the relevant paragraphs in earnings call before topic modeling. So you see the topic modeling, we end up with 6 responses, exposures, and 4 responses. You see the 6 exposures is really something that you have run into, like you heard from the news, disruption to business operation, disruption in a big drop in demand for many business, like for example, dining restaurant, and also travel industry, airlines, and also employee welfare. Just give you some example. Not surprisingly, at the beginning, supply chain disruption is also high on everybody's mind. Liquidity really about the firms, liquidity, whether they are able to make payment to their interest and can continue to pay dividend, etc. Then the positive part is like in the very first 2 months. So large scale lockdown was like March 12, 13 roughly. So by April, this is our firm's responses. So McDonald's was a good example that engaged with community for donation, and also firm do cost cutting, digital transformation from physical to online, and also when Ting asked before, innovation reflects in new products and services development, like the COVID-19 vaccine, for example. So this just shows in terms of intensity. So among the 6 exposures, 4 responses, exposure is in blue color, responses in red color. They just showing you descending order during earnings calls in the months of January to April. What are the key topics emerged from our analysis? So disruption, drop in demand is like number 1. Disruption to business operation is the last, and then disruption supply chain is number 2, and also employee welfare is number 3. So the top 3 on the negative shocks. But then positive side is look at digital transformation is like a very, very big from firm side, because everybody is working at home and everybody is ordering deliveries instead of visiting the stores or restaurants. So that shows, and a new product is number 2 in terms of responses. So just further validate our measure is to look at across different industries. So again, we use Pharma French 12. They show that on the demand side, it's like all those traditional industries, especially like manufacturing, consumer durable. They talk most about the drop in demand. So that's about exposure. Then about the response, we show that digital transformation, so business equipment, finance, and utility is digital transformation is one of the major actions they take. While for in terms of new product development, we see that wholesale, retail, consumer, non-durable, that's exactly living a new norm, that all these delivery services and also Amazon has been doing great, and all the other brick and mortar retailers also following suit. So this just like kind of sanity check, but not robust enough. What we do more is, because exposure to business is a negative thing, so we do a validation exercise. The validation exercise we do is to correlate our firm level measure to where their headquarters are, so where the severity of the pandemic. We also get the data from like Google is to look at exposure versus whether people just got locked in, stay in the residential, not doing much, And also we look at the exposure would be great for firms that have a high labor intensity, means they use more employees instead of using more machines in their business operation. And then we show that overall exposure also correlated with whether the firm in their 10K disclosure has any connection to China. And now surprisingly, our measure is negative correlated with that the firm's industry has a flexibility to work from home, for example, like in the world of finance. So this is just a validation exercise about our firm level measure of severity correlated with some other common markers for the severity to a particular location or to a particular industry. So the result we want to show is, not surprisingly, given strong culture make firms more resilient. For like employees and management just automated to work hard without asking for higher pay, and they become more creative. So here, not surprisingly, what we show is that during crisis period, firm with a strong culture relative to firm with not a strong culture. So this is over a roughly 3 month period just before the first payout in March, is a 4 percentage point higher stock return. So this kind of thing that market forward looking, they really expect firm with a strong culture to outperform. What we also showed previously was a panel data, so previous cross-section data. Here we also do a panel data to do so monthly return across firms. What we show here is that consistent with our intuition, everything else being the same. If you have a greater exposure to COVID-19 through earnings calls, you suffer. However, what we highlighting is really the offsetting effects. If you have strong culture in net, the drop in, so everybody has a drop in stock return. Your drop in stock return is less pronounced. So it's like almost close to none. So just another way, and also this has a firm fixed effect. So this is just another way to show that firms with strong culture will outperform their peers in terms of stock return. So naturally, we run a horse race that maybe culture is not culture, is something else firm doing that make them more resilient. So what we do is we introduce other known factors that make firm resilient. So first two would be CSR, so the ESG scores of the firm. So now we confirm other people's finding that firm with higher ESG scores, they outperform. But importantly, controlling for those factors, ESG scores, strong culture still load. We also control for some other measures, like firm in an industry has a flexibility to work from home. So that also load, but controlling for that, we still have strong culture still has its significance. Interestingly, both prior epidemic experience or connection to China didn't help. One interpretation is that China turned around so fast. So the upsetting effect of connecting with China initially, immediate turnaround become so liability become assets. Because even today, of course, now today China slows down, but since over the last 18 months or so, Chinese economy has been outperforming. So connection to China is actually a blessing. So that's we didn't find. That's why we didn't show that China is a liability here in terms of return performance. So the other thing we want to show is, yeah, so stock return is good. So firm outperforming in terms of stock return. So curiosity is exactly how those firms with strong culture do to generate those strong returns. So luckily, because of textual data, we actually can have some ideas about what firms' responses to COVID-19. And very interesting to us is that firms with a strong culture, they do not engage in excessive cost cutting. Instead, what I'm highlighting is that firms with strong culture, they actually do more community engagement like McDonald's did. They also do more digital transformation like Nike did, and also new product development like Moderna and Pfizer did. So we're just showing you that during pandemic, strong culture actually shaped some of the corporate strategies in the aspect we delineate, like pivotal into digital and also stay innovative. So lastly, So what before we had is textual data. So the very last part is to look at some operating performance measures that also consistent with our hypothesis, which is about productivity. So what we show here is that firm with a strong people culture, so that's integrity, teamwork, respect, or strong technology culture, that firms score high on innovation and quality. What we show here is higher productivity. So consistent with the very intent of culture is to make it people that so highly self-motivated without management prodding, without higher compensation, they just do the work. If they are in a culture, if they are in an organization with strong culture. And we also show interest in consistent with the textual data that people with a strong culture, they actually do not. So layoff is based on media search done by Teng Fei, my colleague in the audience, that they actually do not make many layoff announcements or layoff decisions. So that's also, so strong culture, more caring, so strong people culture. Lastly, we also show that in addition to stock returns, so stock return is forward-looking. What we do here is quarterly operating performance, because we, as time goes by, we had the luxury of more quarterly data. So we actually can look at operating performance. So what we show here is that quarterly ROA or RS also for firm with strong culture, they tend to outperform. So this is always firm fixed effect. So we control, so we basically compare a firm with strong versus not with strong culture, and also over time. So let me conclude. So what we do here is just consistent with the general thesis, that is culture really matters. Except in this particular case, we also highlighting culture is very important, particularly relevant and important in bad times. And moreover, with the benefit of textual data, we were also able to delineate some of the channels through which firm with a strong culture outperform. So such as being more community oriented, and also embrace digital transformation more promptly. And last but not least, engage in new product service development. And also they are not cutting costs or doing layoffs as their peers do. So I think I'm done.